On March 19th, a South Korean startup launched, with reported success, a suborbital rocket from a space center in Brazil, demonstrating a hybrid motor that it plans to enhance into a small orbital launch vehicle. So what are pundits saying about Korea's first civilian leap into space? What are the tasks ahead amid efforts to commercialize space? And what is the latest with regard to South Korea's Nuri space project? Welcome to Issues and Insiders. Today, we explore the latest advances in the space industry here and elsewhere. For this, I have Professor Paul Yoon, who is also a NASA Solar System Ambassador, joining us live. Professor Yoon, it's a pleasure to have you with us.
Good to see you again.
I also have Dr. Kang Sung-ju at the Gwacheon National Science Museum with us. Dr. Kang, it's a pleasure as well.
Thank you for having me again as well.
Right. Professor Yoon, Korean startup Innospace recently reported a successful flight of the country's first civilian-made test launch vehicle. Can we start with details about that event?
First of all, congratulations, Korea, for your first commercial successful launch. It is reported that they burn all the propellants and then fuel completely. That's a good sign. Also, their payload, Brazilian inertial navigation system, was functioning properly. So that's a good indicator. And I think their achievement is great because historically, there has been a lot of attempt to carrying the launching through the hybrid rocket using the solid fuel and then the liquid propellants, but it wasn't that quite successful. But Innospace achievement is opening the possibility that a hybrid rocket, which is quite economical and simpler to manufacture, is a big promising. So it's a good sign for future rocket developments.
Right, and staying with that, Dr. Kang, following the success of its suborbital rocket, Innospace is spoken of plans to scale up its hybrid motor, which Professor Yoon touched upon, into a small orbital launch vehicle. What do these jargons mean, Dr. Kang?
All right. So as Professor Yoon said, the success of the Innospace's suborbital rocket is very impressive, and then that's a very good sign for a commercial private project for the Korea. So this success of the Innospace suborbital rocket indicates that their hybrid motor technology has proven to be very effective and reliable for suborbital flights. When they mention plans to scale up their hybrid motor into a small orbital launch vehicle, it means that they intend to develop and build a larger and more powerful rocket capable of placing payloads such as satellites into Earth orbit. Scaling up the hybrid motor would involve increasing its power and efficiency to generate the necessary thrust and velocity required to achieve orbital flight. This typically involves refining the motor's design, increasing the size of the rocket, and enhancing the fuel and oxidizer systems. An orbital launch vehicle is more complex than a suborbital rocket, as it needs to reach a much higher altitude and speed. While suborbital flights reach space briefly and then return to the Earth, orbital flights must achieve the necessary velocity, which is about 7.5 kilometers per second, to maintain a stable orbit around the Earth. If successful, Innospace's small orbital launch vehicle could provide a cost-effective and reliable means for launching small payload, such as satellite for communications, Earth observations, and scientific research. This could potentially open up the new opportunities in the space industry in Korea, particularly for small businesses and organizations looking for affordable access to space.
Right, I see. And keeping in mind what Dr. Kang has just said, Professor Yoon, what are the tasks that lie ahead as Innospace hopes to commercialize its launch vehicles?
As Dr. Kang says, they have to scale up. So I know that the Innospace is planning to, the test flight was about one-stage rocket, but now they are trying to make it two-stage rocket. So they plan to carry up to about 50 kilogram payload to about 550 kilometers sun-synchronous orbit. So they need to achieve the technological advancements also same time is what's coming is they need to, in order to commercialize, they need to come up with a sort of a track record, which means they have to show the market that they have, they're reliable, they have enough experience. And I guess the government role is important because initially the Innospace may not find what significant number of the customer base. To help the Innospace get enough customer base, I think government maybe through the public project, such as NASA help with the SpaceX, would be very crucial so that Innospace has can prove the market that it has enough experience and capabilities.
Right, I see. Dr. Kang, generally speaking, what is the importance of the role of private companies as we seek to further develop the global space industry, would you say?
Definitely, I believe the private sectors have very important role in the global space industry. First, in terms of the cost reduction, competing among private companies can drive down the costs down, making access to space more affordable. They often seek to optimize their operations and develop cost-effective solutions, such as we know the SpaceX uses the reusable rocket technology. That's a very good example for competing between the space industry, private sectors. And in addition to that, the private companies can partner with government agencies, international organizations, and other companies, fostering cooperation and knowledge exchange. These collaborations can lead to the development of the new technologies and capabilities that benefit the entire space industry. Also, private sectors of the space industry, such as SpaceX or the Blue Origin, have generated a significant public interest in space exploration. I think that's very important and leading to increased awareness, enthusiasm, and support from the space-related endeavors. Overall, the involvement of the private companies in the global space industry helps accelerate technological advancement, drive down the cost, and create the new markets and opportunities, and not only for Korea, for all the global part. This, in turn, fosters economic growth, increases international cooperations, and broadened access to space for various stakeholders, I believe.
Right. Professor Yoon, as Dr. Kang has mentioned, we have SpaceX over in the US. And that being said, what can you share with us about the part played by private American companies in advancing the space industry over in the US?
That's a very important question. We can't imagine NASA exploration without a commercial partner. Every major events are it's done through the NASA and then commercial partnership. So if I list all of them, say want to populate for some James Webb Space Telescope, we know that it is really looking to the space. It's done through the collaboration with the Northrop Grumman's, and also our Perseverance rover, which is now the exploring the surface of Mars, is delivered through U.S. Launching Alliance, which is a commercial partner. Also, now NASA is planning to retire our International Space Station by 2031, and the commercial facility will replace it. So it's always a commercial partner will be integral part. And another very important example is commercial partners will deliver NASA payload to the surface of the moon through the Eclipse mission. Also, through the Eclipse mission, one of the Korean's payload, the scientific payload, will be delivered to on the surface of the moon too next year. So they are very, very important part of the American space explorations.
Right. And for the sake of comparison, Dr. Kang, what can you tell us about Korea's private companies that is here in Korea and their participation in advancing the space industry in the country? I mean, are there any hurdles hindering such participation, would you say?
Yes, there are hurdles or hindering places that we have overcome to grow the space industry, private sectors in the Korea. While private Korean companies are increasingly becoming involved in the space industry, there are several factors that may be hindering their participating and growth in the companies in other countries. The Korean space industry has historically been driven by the government-led initiatives and programs. Limited government support for private companies in terms of the funding, incentives, and policy frameworks can make it more challenging for them to develop and commercialize space technologies. And strict regulations and export controls, particularly related to sensitive technologies like rocket engines and satellites, can limit collaborations and technology transfer between Korean private companies and international partners. This can slow down the development and growth of the domestic space industry. Other than this, in terms of the funding cap, private Korean space companies may face challenges in securing funding from venture capitals or other investors, as the space industry is considered very high risk and requires the significant long-term investment. Also, the domestic market for space products and services in Korea may be relatively small compared to other countries, limiting the potential for growth and revenue generation for private companies. Finally, in cultural factors such as general aversion to risk-taking in businesses may discourage Korean entrepreneurs from entering the space industry, which is characterized by the high cost, long development timelines, and uncertain returns of the investment. To address these challenges and prompt the growth of the private space industry in Korea, the government and other stakeholders could consider implementing the policies and initiatives that provide funding and incentives, streamline regulations, facilitate collaborations and technology transfer. By doing so, Korea can foster a more vibrant and competitive space sector that contributes to the long-term economic growth and technological advancement.
Right, and perhaps keeping Dr. Kang's opinions or concerns in mind, Seoul's Science Ministry actually has revealed intentions to put into place policies that support space initiatives by private companies. That being said, Professor Yoon, what policies do you recommend?
I think one of the idea what Dr. Kang says, I think education is a very important part because space industry need a lot of very creative and then enthusiastic participants because of I think that it would be important. But also I think as Dr. Kang says, funding will be necessary. It's very high risk and then to space industry to grow up, there should be some constant support. So I think it'll be important Korean government building up finance so that Korean space company can survive through to the point that they can finally make money in the market. And then I think another thing is giving them a chance to grow up as I mentioned earlier, track record will be very important. So through the government-funded projects, and the company can grow and then have more experience to develop the technology, such as NASA did to the SpaceX. And also, I think it's important government's role is helping the company go to the international stage, such as Artemis programs. I think government want to give the company to have an opportunity to participate those kind of international space project. I think that will be important. Also, I think it is important that government need to bring the space sector into the current economical sector so that maybe government can encourage maybe a company making firefighter jacket or diverse wetsuit or military, the uniform makers get into making spacesuit or give a space environment environment for maybe lens maker to test out their products. So also, I think the government need to diversify helping the company, not only launching also satellite sector, but also biotechnologies, space-grade semiconductor, robotics, and then space food. So it's very important the government need to encourage the other sector have interest in space.
Right, it really is a big industry then. Dr. Kang, Korea's newly rocket. It's poised to mark its third launch come May. What can you tell us about the preparations thus far?
So we don't have an exact date yet, but tentatively the third launch of the Nuri is scheduled to take place around May 10th. That's less than 50 days away from now. The Nuri space launch vehicle that will be used for third launch is currently being assembled at the Gwacheon Space Center. The next step is to combine the first, second, and third stages and load the satellite into the orbit. What is different about this third launch is that it will be carrying a practical satellite into space. Previously, the first launch carried a mock-up satellite, and the second launch a satellite for performance verification. But this time, it will carry the actual operational satellites, such as the next generation small satellite number 2 and SNIPE, which is called the Duyoset in Korean. The third launch will be deemed a success if the actual satellite is placed in the targeted orbit. A total of the 9 satellites will be aboard the Nuri space launch vehicle for this time. The next generation small satellite number 2, built by the KAIST, 4 Duyoset space weather observation satellite from the KASI, which is Korean Astronomy and Space Science Institute, and 1 satellite each from the private space companies, which is Lumir, Justech, Space. The researchers are on pins and needles as they are not sure of their chances of success. China, Russia, and other countries, including the United States, have failed in subsequent launches after the first successful launches. Even so, everything is on track to meet the scheduled launch date so far. Meanwhile, after the third launch of the Nuri, the fourth launch is scheduled for 2025, and the fifth and sixth launches for upcoming 26 and 27 respectively, to ensure reliability of the launching space vehicle.
Right, I see. Meanwhile, Professor Yoon, what is the latest with regard to NASA's Artemis program of lunar exploration?
Okay, so here's a lot of news. Next week, I think Eastern Standard Time, April 3rd, NASA will announce Artemis 2 astronaut who will fly by the moon next year. So that's a good news. And then 2025, first 4 people, first woman, and then first person in color will land on the moon. So that's a big news that's coming.
Right, good to know, of course. And on a light note also, Dr. Kang, what can you tell us about the new spacesuit that Artemis astronauts will wear on the moon?
Oh, yeah. About 10 days ago, NASA unveiled the new moon suit for NASA Artemis astronauts. This spacesuit was developed by a private company called Axiom. There are many private sectors are participating in the Artemis project. The moon suit is a key component that is required for the Artemis program, which will be sending astronauts back to the moon. The Axiom suits will be worn during the Artemis 3 missions, the program's first moon landing, which is scheduled for 2025, as just Professor Yoon told us. The spacesuit lunar gear showing how astronauts could easily squat and move around. The larger clear bubble around the head provides a wide visibility as well as the lighting, as you can see from the right now, and which will be important when astronauts step into the shadowed craters near the lunar South Pole, where the NASA hopes to study water ice at the bottom of the cold, shadowed craters, and it also has a mount for a high-definition camera. Astronauts will get into and out of the spacesuit via hatch. There is a hatch in the backside. This time the spacesuit is a prototype, and this is not exactly what will be going to the moon. The actual suit will be white instead of the dark, which is shown in this time, reflecting heat from the sunlight instead of absorbing it. In addition to that, the current outer covering keeps the inner portion from the being scuffed or damaged during the ground testing. For the moon, the suit will have an outer insulation layer to protect the astronaut from the extreme temperatures, radiations, and dust.
Right, I see. Moving forward, Professor Yoon, the world's first 3D printed rocket, I believe, was recently launched, but with little success. What is the significance of this event?
Yes, I think I want to say this. First of all, I want to say where I am now. I'm very close to the headquarters of the SpaceX, and then Innospace. I mean the relativity space, which launched first. Launched about the 3D printed rocket. Just like Innospace, which tried to cut the time and then cost and make it the rocket simple as possible, use the hybrid. 3D printing rocket is also another attempt to minimize the cost and then minimize the complexities. So it's very significant. It's a good way. It's a good sign for the market because which means the customer can deliver their payload into space with a cheaper price. So that way, it's very significant. Of course, it was there. I think the companies about the early stage attempt. So I think it's going to be at a certain point. It's kind of achieved certain their technological goal. They achieve it, even though it was not completely succeed. But I believe that eventually, relative space will make through, which means we could expect a lot of cost reduction in the launching service. Furthermore, 3D printing will be crucial in the space exploration. For example, when we deliver parts to all the modules to the space Mars, it'll take more than half a year. So it's better for manufacture necessary facility using in-source resource utilization, which means using the local material. Myself, as one of the proposers for human landing site on the surface of Mars, NASA has specified we need to land human to a place where we could find the resources, including metals. Maybe relative space in the future later, when they go to Mars, they could maybe manufacture using resource there, then which will be possible to, we are making human presence on the Mars more sustainable.
Right, which would be a really remarkable feat, of course. And now, Dr. Kang, very briefly speaking, because I believe we have about a minute left, what look to be the broader merits and demerits of commercializing space?
The commercialization of the space offers significant benefits, including the economic growth, increased access to space, and technological advancement. However, it also presents challenges related to the space debris, environmental impact, and security concerns, among others. So there are merits and demerits, but we have to balance up those parts. And then I believe the commercializing space is very necessary for advancing the Korean space industry.
Right, I see. Good to know, of course. Right then, Professor Yoon, as always, thank you very much for your time and your thoughts. And Dr. Kang, thank you very much for your insights.
Thank you very much.
Right, well, that ends Monday's edition of Issues and Insiders. Tomorrow, that is Tuesday, we touch upon mobile payment services here in Korea amid the recent entry of Apple Pay. Do join us then. Thank you for now.